Okay, we are back. Um, got myself a nice cocktail to enjoy this with a little Kentucky Mule. Ooh, that is strong. Made that a little stronger than I meant to. I haven't eaten dinner yet. I might get even more animated than usual here. Let's see. Okay, let's get back to where we were. So we left off talking about the Fair Housing Act, and okay, let's see if this is gonna. Okay, so now all of that is a way of showing what was going on, why people were so angry in the 1960s. Now I'm going to center on the rise of the Black Panthers. There were other Black militant groups, of course. Black Panthers are just the most famous, the most well documented, and even then, not always the best documented. And of course, like I said, it's Oakland, it's my neighborhood, so I have it is a connection to it. And with all of this stuff, with these housing codes and redlining and everything, almost nowhere was that more prevalent than Oakland, California. Today, Oakland is seen as this sort of like bastion of diversity. Well, it's getting a little bit less so, unfortunately. It definitely was when I first moved here in 2000. Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, it's getting harder and harder for people of color to be able to be able to afford to live here. But today, it's around 33% white, 25% Black, 25% Latino, 17% Asian. One of the most diverse cities in America. But in the 1960s, the whole demographic, demographics in Oakland were a major flux. Oakland was a pretty little town, and a very white town. I shouldn't say little town before World War II. It was, decently sized, but it definitely grows, in World War II because its proximity to shipping yards and things like that in the harbor. And it definitely becomes significantly less white. Oakland had been a center of KKK activity, in the 1920s. And then, all of a sudden in the 1940s and 50s, you have this explosion of the Black population as part of the Great Migration. Between 1950 and 1960, the Black population went up by 1,000%. Went up, 10 times what it had been just between 1950 and 1960. And as more Black people move in, more white people are going to move out. It's white flight, is what it's called. And by 1960, you have about 50% white, 40% Black, and most of those Black people are only allowed to live in West Oakland and parts of North Oakland. And of course, the Oakland Police Department is definitely one of these police departments that is going to be very reactionary. They're 98% white police force in 1960. There was only 16 Black officers in a 661 person department. And they definitely, had kept this whole idea of, explicitly saying, the only way to deal with the Black population is to keep them in these neighborhoods, and the only way to do that is to make them afraid of us. Sort of let them know anytime we can come in and do whatever we want to you. Whether you actually committed a crime or not, you need to be afraid of the police. And that, it was thought to be like, okay, well, we'll just keep everybody scared all the time. That's, what Oakland is like, in the 50s and 60s. Growing up there were two young men in these conditions, Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, who go on to found the Black Panthers. Both of them were the sons of Black Southern migrants. Bobby Seale was born in Texas in 1936. He comes to Oakland in 1944. Huey Newton is born in Louisiana in 1942, comes to Oakland in 1945. Both of these are, Southern families who, thought better life in California as part of the Great Migration, and, were hit hard by reality. Bobby Seale had dropped out of high school to join the Air Force in 1955, but he was dishonorably discharged in 1958 after getting in a fight with his commanding officer. He then worked as a sheet metal mechanic at an aerospace factory, finished getting his diploma, and he started attending Merritt Community College, where he got interested in radical politics. Huey Newton, by contrast, was a troubled teenager, graduated from Oakland Technical High School without even being able to read. He had talked later, saying that every teacher he ever had didn't care about teaching him anything. They only cared about forcing him to conform to white expectations. Not white standards, white expectations. They had expectations of him not being able to learn as being, a dumb thug of a kid, and they wanted him to conform to those standards. They said they made him feel ashamed of being black growing up. After graduating, not being able to know how to read, he did eventually teach himself to read, and he enrolled in Merritt College, where he got involved in radical politics. So these two guys meet at Merritt College, which had its own burgeoning sort of radical politics, this Afro-American association, which is almost like a proto-Black Panthers in a way, but sort of much more expansive, fighting for Black rights. And it was all centered around this college. And this is where the college is I could throw a rock, it hit my house. Well, I can't throw that far, but I'd say, it's 100 yards from my house. Today, now it's a senior citizen facility. It is part of a children's hospital a little bit, because this college campus became so radical. There's so much radical politics and so much potential violent Black power activity there. They shut down Merritt College and moved it up into the Oakland Hills and closed it down. It's on now what's now Martin Luther King Boulevard, but at the time it was called Grove Street. And it was right in the middle of where, one of the few neighborhoods Black people were allowed to live. It had been there for, a long time before that, and, became increasingly Black as the neighborhood became Black. And there's this sort of very porous, border between, sort of neighborhood and school that was going on there, which made it very, you could see how that'd be radicalized, especially as angry young Black people growing up in this area become educated. That can be a dangerous thing, at least as far as the rest of society is concerned. Newton and Seale went and saw Stokely Carmichael speak at UC Berkeley. If you watch the video, you see a little bit of Stokely Carmichael in there. He works for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And he had been, you could also see in that video where Carmichael had been sort of becoming increasingly radical after one of his good friends, James Meredith, had been killed by a sniper as part of the civil rights movement, and started moving away. SNCC had always been a little more, not as into the MLK's, nonviolent resistance as much, and he Carmichael had been, what just happened? Oh, I know what happened there. Okay, I don't know if your visuals got interrupted there or not. But Carmichael, basically started to say, Black people shouldn't rely on white people anymore. They can't wait for for white lawmakers to give them rights anymore. And this wasn't a new concept. We've seen, not just Martin Luther King, or not just Malcolm X is talking about it, going back to the Harlem Renaissance, we've seen language like this before. And even when Seale and Newton saw this, they're very much inspired by this idea of making a Black community just for Black people, you know, the sort of self-isolated community. And they actually looked at like Chinatown, the Oakland and San Francisco Chinatowns, and said like, you know, there's Chinese people there that like don't even speak English, but like are just fine because, you know, like Chinese people go to Chinese businesses, and you know, and they have their own self-sustaining community there. They're saying, why can't we do that with Black neighborhoods? So the Black Panthers are going to be kind of a first step towards that. The reason they take the Black Panther is Stokely Carmichael, when he gives a speech, there's this flyer you see below Carmichael's picture here of a Black Panther, which actually has something to do what was going on in the South and in Alabama, which it's a huge tangent to go into. But on the flyer, he was using the pictures of a Black Panther. I should say, I thought I had a slide for this somewhere. This is not connected at all to, yeah, there it is. This is not connected in any way to Black Panther. Oh, come on, man. Now it's going way too fast, going over. Okay, so there's actually a weird coincidence. A lot of people like have assumed that the Black Panthers were, you know, somehow inspired the comic book character Black Panther or vice versa, but actually they were invented at the exact same time. They both appeared in October of 1966 with, you know, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale here in Oakland, California, as a sort of radical group that towards, you know, Black power, you know, and they take their off of the Stokely Carmichael flyer. At the exact same time, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee were in New York City working for Marvel Comics, and Stan Lee had read like a pulp novel book with like a detective who had a Black Panther as a sidekick or something, and he just thought it was like cool. He thought Black Panthers were cool, and so when he wanted to explicitly make a Black superhero, he got the idea of making this guy a Black Panther. So these two people, you know, or four people that, you know, do not know each other whatsoever and have no connections at almost the exact same time, are both coming with these two extremely popular ideas that will, you know, with Black Panther connected to it. It's just one of the weird things in history. Newton and Seale start the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. And they see it as for like independence for the Black community that needs to be, first thing they need to be able to do is curb police brutality as the number one problem, keeping people being able to live peacefully in their community. The fact that the police can show up at any time and abuse anybody for any reason, just total arbitrary rule. And they need to have some sort of check on that. And the Black Panthers originally, that is their whole thing. They're going to expand out like relatively quickly, but they're going to, but in a time before everybody, you know, has cameras on phones in their pocket and can video police doing horrible things, you know, that doesn't exist. You know, people don't even have video cameras really at this point. Like, so they're going to follow around police cars as they drive through Black neighborhoods. And every time they pull a Black person over, they're going to get out, take pictures, take notes of what's going on. And they're policing the police, you know, in every sense, just to be witnesses to what's going on, take pictures, try and document in every possible way they can so the police know you can't, you know, like somebody's watching, somebody's really paying attention. And of course they're doing this while they're dressed like badasses. They very intentionally make this uniform of black leather jackets, berets, the leather gloves, all that stuff. That's, you know, very intentional to, you know, to look like badasses, to look like revolutionaries in this sense. So, you know, they're looking very intimidating. They're also going to carry guns. That is a big part of it. So these guns won't always be loaded, but sometimes they will be. And there was a sort of obscure California law that allowed open carry to be a thing. Cat's coming up here. It allowed open carry in California going back to the Old West days. And this is far before there's any Second Amendment fights. The idea of individual citizens having the right to bear arms on the street, like nobody interpreted the Second Amendment that way at this time. That is something that comes along later, and actually this plays a role in that a little bit. But nobody thought that you know, like the Second Amendment gives you the right to carry guns around with you. But there was this old law in California dating back to the Wild West that you could carry guns in California, and you could be loaded. Basically, as long as you're not pointing them at anybody, you can do that. Nobody took advantage of this, but they had, in school, found out about this law, and they said, like, okay, as we follow around cops, documenting their stuff, we're going to carry guns. The cops are not going to like this at all, but there's nothing they can do about it. Especially these guys who are super aware of their rights and are able to quote, like, off the top of their head, can quote the statutes that allow them to be able to to carry these weapons. There's not a lot the cops are going to be able to do about it. And anytime they arrest these guys, they're going to be able to get out really quickly. So there's other things that the Black Panthers do. There's some stuff I love that apparently. Also in my neighborhood, there's this very busy intersection, what's now Martin Luther King and 51st Street. There's all kinds of traffic that goes in, and now there's a very busy stoplight, but back then there wasn't even a stop sign, and kids in the neighborhood kept getting killed by cars that aren't stopping for them. So, and they kept petitioning the city to get stop signs put up. The city kept not doing it. So the Black Panthers went and cut down signs from white neighborhoods and put them up there, and then stationed people with guns next to them. Is basically just being like, well, are you not going to stop at the stop sign with a big intimidating black dude standing next to it? So I don't know. I'm not totally sure if that story is true or not, but I want it to be true. So I don't know. I haven't done much fact checking on that one. So they expand their thinking. I don't want to go into a ton of details. They, like, within about a year, they put out this manifesto, this 10-point program, what we want now. And it gets definitely more political. They were definitely, from the beginning, they definitely had a lot of political ideas. They're always very communist. In fact, one of the ways that they will make money early on is selling copies of Mao's Little Red Book. Little Red, like Mao Zedong, the chairman of the Communist Party in China, had this book that was like basically this aphorisms on how to be a good communist. And this was a very popular thing amongst like college students at the time. A lot of there's a lot of people that were communists, or at least like pseudo communists. And the Black Panthers would go onto the Berkeley campus and sell copies of Mao's Little Red Book at like a 300% markup. They buy these things at like for $5, sell them for $15. And these Berkeley students, like these white Berkeley students, could buy that book for $5, at the little store down the street. But they're just stoked on like buying like this communist book from like these intimidating black dudes in leather jackets. That makes me like, yeah, man, I'm down with the cause too. So Black Panthers knew what they were doing, and were able to make money with that. But anyway, so manifesto. The Black Panthers, we want freedom. We want the power to determine the destiny of the Black community. Totally fair. We want full employment for our people. That's a little bit harder. Full employment for all people, is pretty difficult to maintain. We want to end the robbery by white men of our Black community. Vague. We want decent housing, a fit shelter for human beings. Legitimate. That's definitely something that should be done. We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of the decadent American society. We want education that teaches our true history and our role in present day society. Also legitimate, and we've come a long way in teaching. The fact that I'm teaching this to you right now, is something. You might know some of this history already. Is something. Exposes the true nature of decadent society. That's, yeah, I don't know. I think you're going to get all kinds of people admitting like, oh yeah, what our ancestors have been doing for all these years is wrong, and what we're all still doing is wrong. That's a pretty big ask. We want all Black men exempt from military service. This is in the middle of the Vietnam War. A lot of Black people had felt like, why should I go have to kill people in Vietnam on behalf of a government that treats me so horribly? That's not right. So I think that's a pretty legitimate concern. An end to all police brutality and murder of Black people, again, very fair. We want the freedom for all Black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons and jails. That one's insane. All Black men who are locked up in all jails and prisons everywhere just to be set free. Yeah, not only is that not going to happen, that's just a bad idea. Some people are there for good reasons. Some people that are not, but some people probably are. I shouldn't go through all of these, but you get an idea of this sort of general beliefs. And I really can't say how much they thought all of these things would happen. But yeah, they quickly put out another point of what we believe. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into any of these right now. I would say the 40 acres and the mule thing. If you ask me about it, if somebody asks me about it, I will talk about it later. I'm not going to go down that tangent right now. The 40 acres and a mule thing often is misunderstood, but it is an interesting story. But I'm going to wait till if somebody asks me about it, I'll tell you about 40 acres and a mule. So you, obviously the police hate this shit. They do not like being followed around by these guys with guns who are reporting everything that they're doing and are doing it legally. So how can they possibly stop them from being able to do that? Well, let's make what they're doing illegal. And you can be damn sure that white legislators are going to want to back them up and do that too. So there is, I hate to bring in, we talk about the Rumford Act. This is the Mulford Act, totally different. Mulford was a state legislator who wanted to close that loophole, allowing open carry of firearms. And sort of ironically, these are going to be Republicans who are doing this, that want to make sure that people are not allowed to carry weapons on the street. So I'm going to open my window. It's getting hot in here. So they want, they want to ban, the carrying of firearms on California streets. And this is very much explicitly aimed at the Black Panthers. The only people who are doing this in California at this time is the Black Panthers. So, with the request of law enforcement, they're trying to stop that. The Black Panthers find out that they are debating this law and exercise their rights as citizens to go to the courthouse and observe lawmakers talk about their their right to be able to carry weapons. But they're not just going to go to the Sacramento State Courthouse and observe. They're going to do that while they're carrying weapons, while they're exercising their right, which is, it's still legal for them to take, to carry guns in public places. They're going to, walk into the State House, the California State House in Sacramento, carrying rifles and shotguns and things like that. This does not go over well with the people that are there. Ronald Reagan, governor of California, is there with the legislatures as this is happening. They're going to arrest these Panthers. Those charges will get dropped, but this is a news report from the time of what that looked like. The audio quality, or the video quality, is not the best. The audio is okay, but the video quality, this is definitely one of those things that just aged badly over the years. But you'll get the idea.
Anyway, the next thing I know, I'm marching on the Capitol because we're up there to protest a bill they're trying to put in to keep us from carrying guns. Ronald Reagan is over here on the big front lawn. I got a statement to read. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense calls upon the American people in general and the black people in particular to take careful note of the racist California legislature, which is now considering legislation aimed at keeping the black people disarmed and powerless. At the very same time, racist police agencies throughout the country are intensifying the terror, brutality, murder, and repression of black people. Ronald Reagan is escorted off the lawn by the state capitol police. I says, we can go inside somewhere. Isn't there a spectator section? I have these black Panthers up here with signs on the center floor. Wait a minute. Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I was under arrest. Am I under arrest? Am I under arrest? Am I under arrest? Take your hands off me if I'm not under arrest. Am I under arrest? I'm telling you to take your hands off me. They put trumped-up charges of conspiracy and felonies on everyone who went in to exercise a constitutional right and said they had no right to bear arms in a public place. The California Penal Code Section 12020 through 12027, and also the Second Amendment of the Constitution guarantees the citizen a right to bear arms on public property.
So, yeah, I love when the guy asked for a spectator section, but that gives you, sorry, I get distracted when I'm having to do all of these different things going back and forth. So they get arrested. Like I said, the charges will be dropped against them. This doesn't start back at the beginning. Oh, damn it. The charges, end up getting dropped, but they basically just wanted to get those guys out of there. The debate will go on. They're going to rush Ronald Reagan out of there. Assume he needed to change his pants after that. But then they come back later and pass the Mulford Act, which does take away the open carry law. This doesn't mean Black Panthers are going to stop carrying guns necessarily. They're just going to be doing it illegally at this point. And they're going to become increasingly illegal as they are made, as the practices are made to be illegal. But before we go further down that road, I don't know, these are Republican legislatures, Republicans who are pushing to take away people's rights to carry guns. And Ronald Reagan, who, like I said, hero of the conservative movement, saying that there's no reason why a citizen today should be carrying a loaded weapon. It's a ridiculous way to solve problems among people who have solved problems with goodwill. And he said, the Mulford Act would work no hardship on the honest citizen. And this is going to not just happen in California. As Black Panther chapters are starting to open up around the country, a bunch of other state legislatures are also going to pass similar laws. And there would be a federal gun law in 1968 regulating gun dealers and licensing. It's the first federal gun law ever passed. Because it's right after this huge wave of happening in the States because of the Black Panthers chapters opening up. And I just find it's so ironic that it's Republicans doing it. And it's completely endorsed by the NRA at the time. The NRA at this time is just basically some old men who teach people how to shoot guns safely on the weekend. Who go out to a field somewhere and and teach gun safety. Everybody is against oh no, we got to take away people's guns. We got to take away people's guns. Second Amendment does not guarantee you the right to carry a gun. That is the Republican Party stance. It's after the Black Power movement dies down, and in the 1980s, then all of a sudden you see the NRA really start to transform, and you start to see this sort of conservative movement towards the right to carry guns, because they're making it a social issue and really, they're going to tie it to the idea of growing up in the country, and guns are your way of life, and they're going to make it a social issue, purpose and that type of stuff. But 20 years before that, when it was black men carrying guns on city streets, no. Second Amendment not talking about that. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I just find that highly ironic. So, and you can imagine, those dudes who show up in a Starbucks, in Texas, like with with the AK-47, under their arm, or an M14, and just to make a point about gun rights, and like, oh, I'm just doing this because I can do this anywhere. If that was black people doing that, people would lose their fucking minds. So anyway, like I said, throughout this, Black Panthers are opening up chapters around the country that is scaring the hell out of law enforcement, including the top law enforcement officer in the country, director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, J. Edgar Hoover. And it's worth talking a bit about J. Edgar Hoover a bit right here. He will be the biggest foe of the Black Panthers, and really the FBI in general. And Hoover had been in this job. We're in the 1960s now. Hoover had been doing this job since 1924. He was the first real director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Basically, when Prohibition happened, the federal government was not prepared to fight against the rise in organized crime, because there was no federal law enforcement agency, this national law enforcement agency. Americans hated the idea of having a national law enforcement agency because they were worried about the secret police. The FBI had existed since 1908, but that was like a thing to do this certain, investigate a certain land deal that Teddy Roosevelt wanted done, and it's just a tiny little organization for little investigations. But in 1924, when there's this huge rise in organized crime thanks to Prohibition, and the mafia is really becoming in power, to be able to track these people down and across state lines and be able to get them, they decide we need to have a Federal Bureau of Investigation. And J. Edgar Hoover, 29 years old at the time, was made the director of that, and they expanded the FBI out extremely quickly. And they even started tapping phones right away. I didn't even know you could do that. That was technologically possible in the 1920s to be able to tap phones, but they did. The FBI quickly starts going after bank robbers, crossing state lines. They investigate the KKK as the KKK starts growing, monitoring their activities and shutting down terrorist activities of the KKK, things like that. By the 1940s, J. Edgar Hoover had this idea that people were trying to tear down the United States, and those people were communists. He saw the Great War the United States was a war against the USSR and communism, and was worried there was some sort of fifth column. There's some sort of these secret terrorist agencies and spies in the United States, the Soviet Union had sent over, and that they're gonna try and undermine American democracy. So Hoover, with probably a little bit of clinical paranoia to how much he was deeply invested in this stuff. He becomes obsessed with it, and he sends out agents all around the country to investigate almost every person in public life. He thinks that he's worried about Hollywood actors influencing people. If they have communist ideas, or there might be communist messages in movies that Hollywood screenwriters put in there. So we need to find out if they have communist they have some sort of secret communist agenda that they might put into a movie, and that will secretly make kids into communists one day, that then America becomes communist. He was legitimately scared. A lot of people were legitimately scared about that stupid bullshit. And but so Hoover goes out and investigates tons and tons of people in every part of public life, and comes up with a ton of dirt. Most of them are not communists. None of them are communist or Soviet Union agents. But he comes up with a ton of dirt about what these people are doing. I'm gonna smoke a little bit of my e-cigarette. Can't have a cocktail without smoking a little bit of nicotine. Sorry. Hoover, like finds out all this dirt on all these people. He knows, what sports figures are cheating on their wives. He knows what politicians are secretly gay. Who's going to a bathhouse, things like that. Like journalists, actors, anybody, writers, they all and he finds all kinds of dirt, and he uses that as leverage. He's so convinced of what he's doing is right. He's going to blackmail people that are no way connected to anything bad. Basically, like, if you're opposing his policies, that's against America, and and you need to be you need to be seen how you're wrong. And this quote I have from him here: "Justice is incidental to law and order," says so much. Like, whether or not you deserve to be punished does not matter as long as law and order is maintained. That's J. Edgar Hoover's philosophy on life. And there's tons of people that wanted to take him down. U.S. presidents wanted to take him down and couldn't. He was too powerful. He's honestly probably the most powerful American of the 20th century. President Harry Truman said, we want no Gestapo or secret police. The FBI is trending in that direction. They are dabbling in the sex life scandals and plain blackmail. J. Edgar Hoover would give his right eye to take over, and all the congressmen and senators are afraid of him. They would try to get these guys, to get them removed, but then as soon as you try to remove them, Hoover's men show up at your door, and and it could just be some low-level person who they need to vote for. They're like, hey, we saw you coming out of the YMCA over here, and you've been doing dirty stuff. Through that, every time I need to try to take him down, that stuff evaporated. And Hoover was totally convinced he's right and everything. Hoover was seriously worried about the civil rights movement. There were communists, people that were openly communist, that were involved in the civil rights movement. He's also pretty racist, just in general. So when the Black Panthers appear, here are Black radicals carrying guns, talking about revolution and communism just openly. This is his greatest fear of what could possibly happen. And he's convinced that, when the revolution comes, it's going to happen from the Black Panthers. And it's pretty absurd in lots of ways, but, that's, he calls it the greatest threat to our internal security of this country. And he's convinced that, they're being supported by the Soviet Union, which there's no evidence of that. But, the crimes committed by the people, things that were done against the Black community, maybe you should look there. Anyhow, I should say that when Hoover dies in 1972, the FBI has this horrible reputation, and they were going to work really hard to reform that. And the FBI, that is not who the FBI is today. I definitely don't want to say that. I think the FBI is getting a really bad rap today. They're not Hoover's FBI. But under Hoover's FBI, he authorizes COINTELPRO, so a counterintelligence program. And this is counterintelligence by a domestic law enforcement agency. This is not like the CIA, who operates overseas. This is the FBI operating on American soil, who has a counterintelligence program. And they're not going to arrest the Black Panthers. They're not going to try to stop them from committing crimes. In a lot of cases, they're going to encourage them to commit crimes. The whole point of COINTELPRO is to divide Black power groups from each other and divide them from anybody who might support them, and especially alienate them to the American people. And this is going to sound like crazy conspiracy theory shit, but it is not. This is well documented with evidence. So they're going to send in FBI agents to infiltrate the Black Panthers and, push them towards actions, push them towards committing crimes that will make, the American public be like, whoa, we thought these guys just wanted civil rights, and now they're now they're getting in gunfights and things like that. They're going to write fake letters to other groups. This is a group called the US organization in Los Angeles. And the LA chapter of the Black Panthers, they write fake letters between those groups with like death threats against the other leaders. So each of these guys are like, whoa, that guy just threatened to kill our leader's life. Drinking giving me the burps. And this guy's threatening, to kill our life. It starts up basically this, campaign of building up animosity. And the US organization gets in a fight with the Black Panthers on the UCLA campus. This is another weird thing. This has to do with Angela Davis too. Basically, the Black Panthers wanted Angela Davis to be the head of the Afro-Americans department. There was a brand new department at UCLA, the Afro-American department. And then the US organization wanted somebody else. And there's so much animosity between these two groups, they actually got in a gun battle over this issue. Who's going to be the head of Afro-American studies at UCLA? Results in like a death and gun battle. That's fucking bananas. But that's the 1960s. And the FBI very proudly helped instigate that fight. It was further alienates these groups from each other, these groups that have common goals, it pushes them apart, and it separates them from the American public. Another example, these flyers that you're seeing here, these were not drawn by any person within the Black Panthers. These were drawn by FBI agents and distributed among leftist groups to be like, oh, this is what the Black Panthers stand for. They just want to kill cops, stab them in the back. They want to beat up, white store owners, and kill them. That's what they're going for. There's one that I saw, which I couldn't find. I have it in a book, but I couldn't find the picture of it to put on here. There was this big, in Oakland, there's this big convention of different leftist groups in 1968. They come together, all, white, black, all these different kinds of people that are part of the protest movement in general. They're going to come together to fight against the common goal of the Vietnam War. And the FBI distributed these flyers of this huge black dude with an afro standing over a bed of this ravaged white woman stand there, and it says the Black Panthers welcome our white delegates to the convention. And it plays on this old fear of black men are going to rape white women, and of course that scares any white women that are there. It scares their boyfriends, and you're not allowed to go see Black Panthers, that kind of stuff. It alienates anybody who would be at this convention and makes them think these guys are all about rape. So it's an extremely effective tool that they use. And again, this is well documented evidence. We know this happened. So anyway, gotta move along. The Huey Newton was pulled over in 1967 on a routine traffic stop, which results in a fight. Apparently the officer recognized Newton and called for backup, and we don't really know what happened. The story's a little inconsistent, but there was a gun battle that resulted in one of the cops dead, and Newton and another cop with multiple gunshots. Newton was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to 2 to 15 years in prison. He's only going to be in prison for a few years, but by 1970, there's an appeal that will reverse his conviction. But while he's in prison, and I should say it's really on some technicalities. We really don't know what happened with that. But while he's in prison, this whole Free Huey movement blows up, and that's sort of more I wanted to get to about this. You see a lot of T-shirts and a lot of that stuff of Free Huey, and this idea that definitely spread to white college students and things like that. That before Code Intel Pro got their fingers in everything. Newton was a political prisoner. Is that he was set up. This was all a thing to be able to take him down from the beginning, and the Free Huey movement becomes a huge part of if you're if you're a white high schooler who wants to piss off your Midwestern dad in 1968. Walk into the house wearing a Free Huey t-shirt and watch his brain fucking explode. It became one of those kind of things. It was one of the first viral campaigns. So one of the people we have to talk about, with Newton in jail, Bobby Seale, I think increasingly try to go towards legitimate politics, saying that I want to distance myself a bit from the Black Panthers or at least move them into legitimate politics. The day-to-day operations of the Black Panthers fell to a guy named Eldridge Cleaver. He's the Minister of Information, and Cleaver was a legitimate horrible person and a lunatic by all accounts, it seems like. The one thing I'll say right at the top, they feel like you really need to know about him, was that he advocated rape as a insurrectory act, saying it was we should rape white women as a political act. I don't know. I haven't read his book. I don't know how he tries to justify this, but he thinks first we need to go out raping white women as as a way of revolution, and not only that, we should to practice on how to be better rapists. We should practice raping on Black women. That was his stance. Seriously. I feel like that's all you need to know about the guy. But there is more to know about the guy. In 1968, he gets in a shootout with Oakland Police Department, and it might have been, we don't know if it was an ambush that Cleaver led against the police or the police had ambushed him. But we do know that 2 cops were dead, including and also a couple of Black Panthers, including Bobby Hutton, who was the first recruit to the Black Panthers, who was only 17 years old, was killed in this. I have heard, though, it's one of these things that's sort of unconfirmed, that all of the Black Panthers, when were killed, were in their underwear, which would seem to imply that they were captured, stripped, and had stripped down, and then were executed. But there's a lot of evidence to say that that Cleaver had tried to lead an assault on the police, and they turned the tables on him. So we don't really know, but Cleaver ends up fleeing the country, charged with murder. He flees to Cuba. Fidel Castro at the time. Fidel Castro welcomes him as this sort of it's awesome to have this American communist coming to a communist country. This feels like a victory for communism. But at that time, the CIA had kept trying to assassinate Fidel Castro. 12 times they tried to kill Fidel Castro, and they kept not doing it. And probably, Castro was getting a little paranoid. So he becomes worried that Cleaver is actually a secret CIA agent who's there to try and assassinate him. And all of Cleaver's backstory is made up in some sort of way. So he kicks Cleaver out of Cuba, which again, late 60s is nuts. So Cleaver then goes to Algeria. He opens up a separate Black Panthers party there, which will sometimes get into wars with the other Black Panthers party in America. Timothy Leary is involved with that stuff. If you know Timothy Leary, I'm not going to go down that tangent right now. Cleaver visits even North Korea. Kim Jong-un's dad, Kim Jong-il, welcomes him there. This weird sort of whirlwind of just I don't know, sort of the communism and just sort of evil countries and stuff like that. But Cleaver eventually ends back up in the United States. This serves the time that he needs to serve for his shootout with the police. Emerges in the 1980s as an evangelical Christian. Then tries to start his own religion, which is he calls Chrislam. It's a mix of Islam and Christianity, of course. And that group no joke, is called The Guardians of the Sperm. I don't know why. I'm not going to read Cleaver's book to find out why. He then becomes a Mormon and a ultra-conservative Republican who would go on TV in the early days of CNN in the early 1990s and argue that all Black people need to submit to police authority. Almost the exact opposite of what he said, saying that, disavowing the exact, disavowment of his Black Panther days, saying all police, are right in every situation. Black people need to submit. It also turned out that he was a crackhead in this era too. So again, an example of how things were weird in the 1960s. Cleaver's shootout with the Oakland Police Department was just one of many. You have a bunch of examples of sometimes I'd say legitimately crime. Sometimes there'd be police that would that had evidence of a crime that would try to go to arrest Black Panthers and get into these shootouts and standoffs. Other times it seems that they were sort of politically motivated. Basically, there's a Black Panther chapter in our neighborhood, we need to go shut them down. But it becomes sort of a reoccurring theme in almost all big cities in the North and the West to go shut down these Panthers from local law enforcement. I'm gonna move along a little bit to move a little faster. This sort of gets to the fact that the Black Panthers were there's no one version of them. There's no the problem, they had always accepted a bunch of different people into the party. There's not a rigorous vetting of who they're letting in. So some of the people were legitimate criminals. Some of the people were people who legitimately wanted to do good work, and saw this as an opportunity to be helpful to their community. And both of them are working under the banner of the Black Panther. So accepting all people, and of course with all the chaos that that ensues going forward, all of this sort of disarray. There's no sort of oversight of of who is doing what. There's all kinds of misinformation of who is doing what. COINTELPRO is very effective in doing what they do to make sure nobody ever knew exactly what was going on. So some of those groups are going to be acting like street gangs. Los Angeles seems to be a chapter that is very much like that. Or Chicago was very much in the different direction. So like I said, there's no one group that that necessarily fits to this. But today, unfortunately, most people remember the more street crime version of that, which is a legitimate thing that was happening. But there was also a lot of Black Panthers that were actually doing real good for the community. The first free breakfast program in the United States was done in Oakland by, it was the brainchild of Huey Newton. Oh no, I'm losing my notes here. My laptop is dying. Organized by Huey Newton in Oakland. The idea was he knew when he went to school, it was very hard for him to concentrate on school when you're hungry, when your family can't afford to put food on the table. So it was the idea of every morning we were going to make breakfast for kids, through our own funding, to come in and have a good meal before they start today. And at the time, people were like, "Oh, this is communism. This is the worst. I can't believe that they dare do stuff like this. How dare you be so charitable?" It spreads to all of the other Black Panthers start doing the same thing. By the end of that year, Panthers, they're cooking 10,000 meals the kids per day, and all the people who are pissed off, this will be the same exact model that the state and local governments end up picking up. In almost every school district in the country, in every school in the country, there is some sort of program to feed kids who need some sort of assistance. That idea was given by the Black Panthers, by Huey Newton of all people. And this is just the sort of tip of the iceberg. Oh man, my laptop is hella old and not working. Okay, I might have to do the rest of this without any notes. So that's just one of the things that they're doing. They're doing like testing for sickle cell anemia, like a disease that only is a genetic disorder that not only but mostly affects people of African descent, providing birth control and access to abortion, trying to get women in sex work away from pimps and things like that, providing food banks, daycare centers, health clinics, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, you have to think in this way of like most people in the country had this idea of the Black Panthers as being like criminals, as a total criminal organization. And they'd be like, how do they get, how do people in those communities put up with them? Why would like anybody not tell the police about these horrible criminals who are in their organization? It's because these people have been denied all of the services that all of the horrible things that have been happening in Black communities, how much they'd been like cut off from. Black Panthers were providing that type of stuff. So what, like if the government will not help them, but this group will, of course they're going to protect that group. Of course they're going to protect the Black Panthers. This is a thing that gets run into today with terrorist groups in the Middle East, where they get aid and comfort from the local population, because those are the people that are building wells in schools and things like that. And then the United States is baffled by like, these people protect these terrorists. Like, well, they don't consider them terrorists in that country. It's sort of an extreme example because I don't think the Black Panthers were ever terrorists, but they were, offering this type of stuff that the government wasn't giving, and that because of redlining that these communities had been denied. Nobody exemplified this more than Fred Hampton, the head of the Chicago chapter. Fred Hampton was where a lot of the Black Panthers had been the sort of struggling people. Fred Hampton, or struggling teenagers and angry for different reasons. Fred Hampton was an amazing student. He could have done anything with his life. He wanted to be an NAACP lawyer. But right as he's graduating high school, when the Black Panthers appear, he gets this, he thinks like, I can do help right now. Instead of going away to school for, 8 years at least, to become a lawyer, I can be helping people right now in the streets. And becomes part of the Black Panthers in Chicago and quickly rises to the top of that chapter, and does all kinds of, he leads the way in these sort of like healthcare clinics. He helps stop gang violence. They've been warring gangs between Puerto Rican and a Black gang in Chicago, and he helps negotiate a peace between them and convince those guys to help out his community service that he's doing. He's really his first sort of community organizer. And he uses this phrase for them called the Rainbow Coalition, which ends up getting picked up by different politicians like Jesse Jackson and stuff later on. But he really, he's at the spearhead of all of these different programs. And he's young, he's good looking, he's charismatic. Everybody loves him. He can give a great speech. He's educated, and this makes him a threat. He's uncorruptible. He doesn't drink. He doesn't do drugs. All of the other stuff that might take down other Black Panthers leaders, he does not take those baits. So to J. Edgar Hoover, that makes him public enemy number one. Oh man, now I really am gonna want my notes for this part, because there's some stuff, there's numbers and quotes I'd like to have along here, but whatever. So hold on one sec. Yeah, oh, that's fine. When Fred Hampton is assassinated, and I'm going to say that is assassinated by the Chicago Police Department with the help of the federal government. is done in a very particular way. The police will get authorization and working with the FBI for investigating his apartment for holding guns. They say he's stockpiling guns. There's no evidence of that. They won't find any guns when they get there. The whole idea of like where they supposedly got the evidence for this does not exist. But nonetheless, they get authorized for this raid on Fred Hampton's apartment off of this pretext. They're going to fire over 100 bullets into his apartment. The only gun that's going to be fired from a Black Panther gun will come from the security guard who is like out in front of the apartment. He's in the hallway of the Chicago apartment with a shotgun in his lap. A guy named Mark Clark. And when the police come into the hallway, apparently he had gotten shot and shot a shotgun in the ceiling. The one shot that's going to come from a Black Panther gun will be in the ceiling. But they shoot him and kill him and open fire into Hampton's apartment without knocking on the door, without trying to arrest anybody. They just fire a hail of bullets into through the wall. Again, there's some 100-something bullet holes in the wall, all of them coming from the outside in, none of them coming from the inside. There was no shootout. They were just firing into there. Hampton was in there with his girlfriend, and there was another Black Panther in there. Hampton doesn't wake up through this. Apparently, that night he had fallen asleep on the phone with his mom, which is a weird thing to happen. He didn't do drugs. He didn't drink. So people don't usually just fall asleep for no reason. It's thought that he might have been drugged for some reason, but we don't know that. That's a speculation. But we do know that they fired all these bullets into there. Hampton had been hit. The other Panther and Fred Hampton's pregnant girlfriend were able to avoid the bullets by hiding. Then the police bust in the door, go into Hampton's room and find him, and pull him out of bed and shoot him in the head. The Hampton's girlfriend and the other Panthers there said they actually heard them say, like, "Is that him? Is that Hampton? Yes. Is he still alive? Yes. Pop, not anymore." And even examining at autopsy reports, even shot in like once in his midsection, and then 2 bullets point blank to the head. This is an assassination done to an American citizen on American soil. This is really done by law enforcement. There is no other way to put it. Part of the reason we know about this because there was a break-in at an FBI headquarters in Pennsylvania over a decade later, and they would sneak out a bunch of evidence that had floor plans of, and it had the deal written between the FBI and the Chicago Police. So I don't know. Look into it if you like. For the sake of time, I don't want to spend, especially without my notes. And I don't know, my wife's bugging me. Our food is about to be delivered here, so I need to speed things up. But the Black Panthers were, like after Cleaver is gone, there's this sort of power vacuum. All the men had been arrested and or killed. A lot of the guys had gotten into. Men had been drawn to this movement because it was this macho badass thing, and macho badass men got themselves killed and arrested. A lot of women had got involved to do good in their community. By the early 1970s, women had basically taken over the movement and took it from this sort of like, sort of misogynistic macho bullshit thing to saying that sexism is counter-revolutionary idea. And for a time, when the Panthers are doing their best work, it is when they are led by women in different cities around America. Like I said, in the early 70s. It will eventually die out, though. There's a it will eventually die out, though. There's a bunch of different reasons why. That's sort of COINTELPRO, the sort of, like I said, the not vetting of people, the criminal ties, that have been there from the beginning. When Huey Newton gets out of prison, he seems a lot crazier than he did before. He does a lot of cocaine throughout the 1970s. He starts robbing drug dealers to pay for his free breakfast program. He's like shooting up nightclubs to help feed kids, which sounds like cool. Like if you're in The Wire, sounds like Omar is going to do something like that. But like in real life, that is not good. This is not a sustainable model. He killed. He shot his tailor or pistol whipped his tailor and shot his girlfriend because they called him baby. Which it's the 1970s. Everybody's calling each other baby, but apparently like it was a childhood nickname that he hated. So that's not proportionate to a nickname you don't like. And really, like especially in Oakland, this sort of behavior poisoned the entire operation. This is where they'd had a school in Oakland, and apparently he had a woman teacher beaten just because she had questioned a male coworker. Said like, are you sure you're allowed to do this? And Newton had her beaten for that. So that sort of sexism is kind of revolutionary. Really didn't work out with him. A lot of women, a lot of the people who have been the driving force of the movement left because of stuff like this. By the time you get to 1980, there's only 26 members left. Nobody wants to be associated with the Black Panthers anymore. So, as time went on, all of the bad behaviors became stronger, and all the good influences ended up, fizzling away. And this, I don't know. I find it hard. I honestly think, and it's debatable, that the Black Panthers and the Black Power movement in general were a failure as a movement. They did not accomplish much. I think if anything else, they did more damage than they helped. And that's a debatable historical thing. I'm not going to stand behind that. But I think so much of it has to do with the fact that this idea of their fight was so much harder. The civil rights movement was against obvious racism. In the South, they have these racist laws on the books where like fighting in the North and the West is the subtle systematic racism. It's a thing that is like, it's a fight that can never be won. It's still not won to this day. Like, and trying to do it by being larger than life, by trying to do it by saying we're not going to obey any laws anymore. We're gonna go outside the law and just live the way we think we should live. That was just never going to work. And even if they'd been like strictly disciplined, like MLK's foot soldiers, it was a nearly impossible fight anyway, because how would you ever know that it's done? How do you ever know when you're denied a housing application, you're denied a job, that it's because of the color of your skin? Like racism is a much more subtle thing, which is where we are at today. And then, like I said, the Black Power with the Black Panthers were trying to like fight that with like huge revolutionary changes, and it was never going to work. Okay, I think that's all I really need to get to today. I think I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. I've been doing lectures all day long. If you haven't done the pop quiz yet, do it by Saturday. And I think we're going to have another quiz next week. I forgot to look. I'll post about that later, what's going on with the next quiz. But I think we're going to have a regular quiz next week. And actually, this is the end of the race section of this class. We are now going to jump towards ethnicity. And that is going to be a much more compressed section. I'm going to take gender and ethnicity together, but yeah, next week we're going to take on a totally different thing. So yeah, I'm just going to say right now, quiz next week. I'll talk to you all later.